we're trying to record history and put things down in a way that can be savored for everybody else in the future. And it's not just entertainment, it's also a historical record of what we've learned, what we've researched, and what people can view through the videos and audio.
That was Todd McCartney of the Retro Disney World podcast and the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. And you're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks for joining me here on episode 106 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. I hope you're doing okay out there. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I know a lot of places are reopening, including Universal Orlando. If you're going to those parks or just going about your day, please follow the rules, wear masks, be careful, have fun out there, but we're not out of the woods yet. I also want to talk about what's happening right now in the country following the killing of George Floyd, police brutality happening at protests, so much more right now around the country. Here at the Tomorrow Society, I support this cause. I'm trying to do anything I can to help, giving donations, spreading the word, and trying to listen. But it's not really about me. This is one of those situations where it's like, well, why now? I live in St. Louis, Missouri. Ferguson happened here a while ago. It's a legitimate point. Even here, the goal of this podcast is to talk about theme parks, have a smart discussion, but I feel like it would be disingenuous to completely ignore what's happening. If you follow me on social media, you've likely seen that. I don't want to overstate what I'm trying to do. It's so small, but I don't have a huge platform. My main platform is this show. And granted, I'm still going to be doing what I'm doing. This show isn't going to change. I've been thinking for a while, though, about how the main way I can influence things here is through the type of guests that I choose. And I take that seriously. And I try to find people that I find interesting, that are smart, that have a point of view that is nuanced and something that's interesting. But I have not had a huge diversity of voices, of women, people of color on this show as much as I should. Part of that is the nature of theme parks and the fact that I'm often talking to people that worked in Imagineering years ago, but that's not an excuse. That's an easy way out. But again, I'm going to work harder. I've tried, but I haven't tried hard enough to continue to do the show the way it's been done, but also to bring on a larger variety of guests. And that's something I have control over that I should be doing more of and should have been doing for a long time. I've been thinking about it, but haven't really executed as much as I should. Black Lives Matter. To me, that's a human rights issue. I feel like I need to be clear on where I stand and can still try to do so much more to help out and just to be a better listener to the situation in our country. My guest today is Todd McCartney. I'm really excited by what he's doing over at Retro Disney World, restoring old films and preserving the history of the resort. Todd describes the process that it takes to restore these films, and it's kind of mind-blowing, especially with the Horizons Revisited clip that he put on video that they put up on YouTube earlier this year. Just incredible what they've done with artificial intelligence, and to hear the process, it's much more involved than even I expected in terms of sound, what it has to do to fix each clip. It's not a simple process. And I think it's really important what Todd, Hal, Brian, and JT are doing over at Retro Disney World, of course, and the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. So it was really cool to finally get a chance to talk to Todd. I've talked to Hal twice. I talked to Brian Miles. I hadn't talked to Todd yet. And I think it's great timing, given what they've been doing during the pandemic with their home movie nights in showing amazingly clear versions of the early days of Walt Disney World, which for me is something that either I didn't experience them or like with EPCOT, I did as a kid. And it's really cool to get a chance to see them from that perspective. So let's get right to it. Here is Todd McCartney. Todd, thanks so much for talking with me on the podcast.
You're welcome, Dan. Glad to be here. This is nice to be on the other side of the microphone and not having to do edits after this.
Yes, it's all on me. I'm taking the work from you, and but I appreciate you coming on. I've been a fan of your guys' shows since the really early days in 2014, and as somebody who comes from a similar generation and went to the parks in the 80s and 90s and not as much in the 70s, I still, though, really appreciate your show. And I'm really excited about some of the things you've been doing more recently, too, which I want to start by talking about something that's exciting to me, especially given that Horizons is possibly my favorite attraction of all time, is your Horizons Revisited, which...
Yeah.
Such a cool project, and I've never seen a ride through that looks as good as what you ended up coming up with. So I'd love to hear more about what that process was like to create that video and have it be such good quality.
Sure. It's funny because there's been so many Horizon ride-throughs out there over the years, and, it's mom or dad with the camera on their lap, and they just happen to want to take the whole video or it's portions of it. And some people towards the end got, the smarts to sit there and record the whole thing. But Hal Bowers, who is one of the other co-hosts on the Retro Disney World podcast, knew that the attraction was closing back in late 1999, somewhere in that time period. And he had the wherewithal to not only videotape the attraction multiple times through, he also decided to go through there with a wide-angle lens. Now, most camcorders and cameras have kind of a narrow field of vision that really doesn't match what you can see with the eye. That's why, you take your videos and you get them home, you're like, well, it's not as much as I remember it. So a wide angle is exactly what it sounds like. It's the wide angle. It's closer to your normal vision of field of view. It's actually a little wider at times. That was the first thing, is that we had this somewhat clean footage with a wide angle lens, and he also had the wherewithal to put it on a tripod and get in the car on a tripod and keep this thing as steady as possible. So, when I first had this and we did Retro Magic, I edited it all together and I kind of matched it up with some sound audio tracks that we had, and we never released it to the public, but we played it during the lunch hour at Retro Magic back in October 2019. And I don't know what keyed me in to do this, but all of a sudden I sat down and I was like, I should start to edit this together as, let's get the right audio tracks. Let's get the right sound effects. Let's get the right background music. Well, I opened Pandora's freaking box. That's all I could say, because I'm halfway through this whole thing, and out comes this piece of software called Gigapixel AI. And essentially what it is, it's a way to interpolate HD from SD, so to speak, or you can zoom in on video, make it crystal clear. So it uses artificial intelligence as well as machine learning. And I said, what the hell, give it a try. Before I knew it, it was cleaning it up and adding vacuum marks back into the rug into Mesa Verde or Nova City scene, and details were just popping, and I was able to get the color. I said, all right, we got something bigger on our hands. So now we had this house footage, it was decent, but we wanted to get it into the best possible shape for this HD interpolation. So I went all the way back and deinterlaced it, which means basically when you used to record video or TV, you would watch your old, square 4x3 television. People didn't realize that, but only half the television screen was actually filled with information at any given time. It would scan 240 lines, the evens, and then it would scan 240 lines, the odds, and it did it so fast, to your eye, you saw motion. So there was actually, while it's 30 frames per second, it was actually scanning 60 times, and that's our electricity is 60 hertz, so you can see where this is all going. It's a lot of geeky stuff. But anyway, your computers don't operate that. Your computer is what's called progressive, meaning it's always showing one image at a time after another after another. So you have to deinterlace, which is a way to essentially weave those two lines, all those alternating lines back and forth and bring them together. And wouldn't you know it, also halfway through the project, I found a new way to deinterlace and went back all the way back to the beginning and with the source video. But then we did a lot of things. We stabilized it, and I did noise reduction, basically bringing out that camera noise and grain that you get sometimes, especially in low light situations, which obviously the ride was very low light. Then we ran it through this artificial intelligence upscaler, again, who took it from the 480 lines of resolution up to 180. And it essentially made up, it faked out what it thought would be there. And it's incredible because this machine learning algorithm learns from opposite ways. It says, okay, this is a flag, and this is a flag when it's been scaled down. So therefore, I can be smart in this film and figure out what is a flag or what is a person or what is a plant. And this is how that plant would be scaled up because I know how to do it the other way. And it's, mind-boggling analytics. It took about, I don't know how many runs I did of it doing tweaking it, but it took about 4 to 6 hours just to run the portion of the ride that we need to do an upscale. So, and I think the final run after I had everything tweaked was another 10 hours. Wow. So it created about 400 gigabytes of data, over 40,000 individual still images that represented every single frame in the video. So then we took all 40,000 of those images, stitched them back together into a video, and then we had the rest of the restoration to do. We had to remove the fisheye lens effect from his wide angle lens, so it kind of was distorted, so we get rid of distortion. The AI actually made it a little too sharp, so we'd actually blur it and sharpen it a bit. We went through every single scene and adjusted the color, and then now we have this awesome video. It has no audio, right? You can't just, the ride audio, that how captured was okay. So we actually went back, and this is really cool. There's three portions of the attraction you want to capture. You want to capture the narration, you want to capture the music, and you want to capture the ambient sound effects and dialogue from the audio animatronics, which were 3 distinct tracks, so to speak, in the ride. There was never a good recording of the narration, but How at it again took something for those old enough to remember, you would buy these telephone pickups at Radio Shack, and they were little suction cups, and you put it on the receiver of your telephone, plug it into your tape recorder, and through basically through magnetic resonance and stuff, it would actually pick up what was going on in the speakers and record it really clean. How did this? He got into a Horizons car and put a suction cup on the speaker and recorded the entire narration. So we hired a professional out in LA to take that soundtrack that we had, or I'm sorry, the narration, and clean it up. Then we have, floating around the internet, there have been copies of the original mixtapes and the original recordings from all the sounds all the music of all the scenes. So I sorted them all based on everything. And then we overlaid the narration with the music in every single scene, fading in and out, and taking Hal's narration and putting it in the exact spot in the ride. So we watched numerous Horizons videos to understand, when did the grandfather say this? When did the mother say this? And dropping them in. And of course, one of the most famous lines is, kelp, seaweed, kelp. Wouldn't you know it, the father mucked up the word kelp, and we had to go back and find another track to put in there. And there was another one where the ride was aging by that point, so a lot of words were missed or skipped when the tape got messed up. And he said some word, and then when I looked at the script, it was the only time he ever said that word in the entire ride. So we had to go back and find something of similar volume and match it and just insert it seamlessly. So that it kind of gives you the level of detail. And then the last piece of audio track is what's going on in the actual scene, the beach boy talking, or the desert scene, and sound effects. So we had to find clean, nobody has really any recording tapes of that, so we had to find clean versions from other people's ride-throughs, denoise them, and then weave them in to the actual soundtrack that you were seeing, such to the fact that there's a scene in where they're making a birthday cake, and the background music has a very, very distinct beat. And one of our QA guys, Jim Lemus, who's QAing this, is like, your background music is correct, but the dialogue has music in it too, and it's off by like 2 beats. So you would hear the same music repeated. So we then had to adjust the music we wanted people to hear to line up with the music that we couldn't get out of the background of the audio animatronics recording. So that's kind of the detail we went to it. So if you can imagine layer, and then lining them all up. And then the editing was just phenomenally difficult to get that all lined up. But the end product was above and beyond anything anybody's seen before. And then on top of that, we had to deflicker some scenes too, because Howe's camera captured at 30 frames per second. And I might be putting people to sleep by now.
This is right down the middle of the people that listen to the show. So you're good.
All right, awesome. So Howe's video camera records at 29.97. See, we won't even say 30. We'll say 29.97 frames per second, which is video. But a lot of the projections in the rear projections in the attraction were at 24 frames per second. So what happens is you get a flicker. So we actually used the same denoising software to go back and deflicker those scenes so that you didn't get the flicker and the reflections in on the television and then the back, all the other scenes, all the other parts of the where there was rear projection. And then the last part that came out, this was really towards the end. We did not know what to do or how to handle the end because there just was no good versions of the actual choose your own end. And Howe did a good 3 decent recordings. So we had them. They were okay. Anonymous person came up to us and says, here you go, download this. We open it up and it's basically some pretty high quality transfer from the original Laserdiscs recordings of the 3 endings, improperly deinterlaced, which gave me a whole other thing. So I had to go back and figure out how to actually make them interlaced from being already saved as progressive. It was, again, not going to go into that detail unless you got 20 minutes. But we went through that, and then we actually made a fake mask to go over the end scene to make it look like you were actually in there. And we were going to release 3 different versions, one for each ending. And then we said, you know what? We're going to throw them all in. So you get to ride all 3 versions of the end in Horizons Revisited. So it was pretty cool. But we've got a great video called Behind the Edit that will kind of show you in an article that, goes through all this in a little more detail. It's a big article. You can read through that. And then the video will take you through all the different steps.
Wow. I knew that it was complicated because I've seen a lot of YouTube or various home movies of Horizons, and this is well beyond that. But now that you described it, I was like, man, my understanding of what it would be was like so much less than what you actually did.
We only talked for 11 minutes so far either.
Yeah, I was like, okay, we're done. Good podcast. Yeah. We've covered it. No, it's really cool. And I think obviously it's so complicated and you really needed some of the things that Howe did up front really to make it work. But I am curious too. Mm-hmm. I mean, is this the type of thing that you could do with other attractions from the era, or were there just so many steps with Horizons and with what happened that makes this kind of a unique situation?
I think part of it is unique in that there was so much documentation, so much out there. I will say we have decent footage of a few other attractions where we're going to probably try to mimic it, to do it as best we can. I don't think if we'll get to that level. We have a lot of original master recordings from Journey into Imagination and a couple great ride-throughs. One we're going to be showing on one of our upcoming home movie nights soon with Ron Schneider, the original Dreamfinders, coming on with us. So I think we can do it with that. We have no less than 57 different individual files and different camera angles of Kitchen Cabaret and a master recording there. So we'd love to put Kitchen Cabaret back together so you can see it as if it was a television show with multiple camera angles and cuts and everything. That's one thing that we're going to do. We do have potentially World of Motion. It's a little weak. And then we have a lot of Circle Vision films that we have that Hal filmed on all different multiple cameras. 9 times he went in there and filmed it. So a lot of potential, a lot of time. I don't think we'll reach the quality of what we have with Horizons, but we are looking to continue the Revisited series, in the future. So I think Journey will be the first one. It'll be an easy one compared to what I just did. Then I'll get into the 57 different views of Kitchen Cabaret.
Wow, that's again, you're really hitting down the middle here for this podcast. But yeah, Journey to Imagination is the other one I think about the most, just because those two seem connected, Horizons, The Dirty Imagination, with them closing at a very similar time and also being so beloved. I feel like nothing against World of Motion, and World of Motion, I cannot find a decent ride video of that for some reason. It's like a hard one to film because of the way it's set up. I don't know.
It was very dark. There was a lot of stuff going on the left and the right, so you never knew where to look. The ride vehicle turned a little bit. And that's actually what made Horizon so unique, too, is if you think about it, you just moved from left to right. Everything was always in front of you. There's no other ride out there like that. Well, I guess you consider, what is it, the Train to Rafiki's Planet Watch. Or
Not really the same.
Not really the same. So what was interesting, too, with Horizons, and this is something we would never be able to capture with another attraction either, although in today's day and age, you could probably go do it and try it with multiple cameras. It got us thinking, I realized that, again, the camera just moved from left to right. So what about if we made the left eye see frame 1 and we made the right eye see a different frame and then put it into 3D software? Would we actually be able to see Horizons in 3D? So I got to work on this going, all right, could we make this attraction look decent in 3D? So I started to do some calculations. We calculated what the ride speed was based on some information we had. We took the average pupil distance of the human eye and did some calculations, and it came out somewhere between 4 and 6 frames. So if we offset the video, same exact video, left eye, and then the right eye 4.5 frames behind, sure enough, we produced 3D. So I was dumbfounded. I was like, holy crap, this is really cool, because the camera never moved. Everything just panned. So for those not familiar with 3D, the way that 3D is filmed is 2 cameras, right? One for the right eye, one for the left eye, a specific distance apart. And that's what you see when you go into Muppet Vision or anything like that. You wear the special glasses so that your left eye only can see the left and right. So I put this thing together, and sure enough, we were able to not only turn the attraction around like we did, but we took the core of it, the ride through, and turned it into a 3D experience that you can now experience on your Google headset. You can watch it on YouTube. You can use the old red and blue glasses. And my son has a headset, so I threw my camera in there, and I sat there and watched, and he goes, hold on. And he ran to the kitchen and got me an orange, and he's like, tell me when you're there. And as soon as I was in the Mesa Verde scene, he put an orange up to my nose. I was like, holy crap. It's like I'm there. So the 3D version was another thing. And again, I don't, unless you went into these rides purposefully and just never moved the camera, Horizon's just so unique in that way that we're able to actually pull that off. And I was dumbfounded when we got it released. I was like, man, this is something. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't have anything to watch the 3D version because I know
you can just cross your eyes too. If you can cross your eyes, no, I'm serious. If you use your phone and or watch it, make the video size very small on your computer. If you could do those magic eye things in the 1980s, just cross the left to the right, and you'll sit there and you'll watch Horizons in 3D. It won't be huge.
Yeah, I should try that, because I remember I was online the night you announced it, when you released it, and you said there was a 3D version, and my thought was, man, should I order one of those Google things just for this? And I was like, I don't know if I could justify that. But yeah, some of the other things you mentioned too, like I've watched bad YouTube videos of American Journeys, and I watch it and I'm like, there's no way to really make, and there's the flickering like you said, and and plus with the 360 you can't get the whole experience anyway.
No, but it gives you a total, it's funny because you have the headset on and you want to turn your head and you can't. It's like, I want to look, I can't look over there, but still it's pretty amazing.
It's great. Before we move on, I did want to ask you a little bit, because you mentioned Horizons, and the left to right is a perfect example, but something I found really interesting, even that night when you had your release and people were in the chat room, and a lot of people in the chat room had never actually ridden it and were really excited, and I think there's something about Horizons more than anything else, that it has a lot of fans that only they know the music and they know the YouTube videos and they know the basics, but have never ridden it. And I think that's crazy. So what do you think it is about that? Because it's not just, the thing, but what is it that makes people connect with it so much, even if they haven't experienced it?
Sure. I mean, we're looking at probably the magnum opus of EPCOT in terms of all the Imagineers coming and doing their last final hurrah, so to speak. It was the last one. It encompassed everything that was EPCOT. It touched on land, it touched on sea, it touched on space, all these different things. And I think people just are amazed at that they've never seen an attraction with that many audio-animatronics, in today's age, other than Spaceship Earth, and even then, that's had a few taken out of it over the years. And I don't think any other attraction over the years has had that much of a score that has stayed with everybody from start to finish. That's immersive as other attractions. I mean, I can argue that the Walter Cronkite Spaceship Earth was great, and the World of Motion, if you don't understand how that soundtrack worked, was amazing. I mean, they just very similar to Horizons. They just redid the song over and over and over in different incarnations in every scene. But yeah, it's I think also too, it just has this lore of, I didn't get to experience it, therefore it's cool. And you've got the Hoot Gibson in it and Chief story of them going in it and all that stuff. And I think that just adds to the excitement with it. And yeah, there's a lot of people, and JT on our team included, who were never able to go on it, and then just said, wow, yeah, that is pretty cool. It never will be repeated.
Yeah, and it's also true, too. I think it's not a case where maybe it was like Imagination or even World of Motion, totally different attraction, but the building's there. The fact that they just destroyed the building completely and replaced it with an attraction that, has its merits, but is completely different, I feel like also adds to the allure, too, because it's like, it's such a metaphor for so many things with what's happened with Epcot and Disney and everything.
Yeah, oh yeah, yep, it definitely is.
Okay, well, another thing I wanted to mention that you've done, which is really cool, is the home movie nights that you've been doing on YouTube. And I think especially with so many of us at home due to COVID-19 and just not being able to go to the parks, and then being able to sit there and watch all of these amazingly restored home videos of the 70s and 80s. I mean, when did that idea start to come together, and kind of how did that eventually become a thing that you're doing every week?
Well, we kind of got to rewind 6-7 years ago when I first started RetroDisneyWorld.com, before there was a podcast and before there was restored movies and anything, and before the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, and before Retro WDW on Twitter. There was this website idea I had called RetroDisneyWorld.com, and to take a cue from Walt Disney, I thought there should be a place. Well, I thought there should be a place where we could store all these old photos, which I had collected in a folder on my computer. I thought I was a big shot for having 100 megabytes of awesome old Disney stuff. And this was 6-7 years ago, before Twitter sphere exploded and everything else out there, and so I started it, and, people joined in. That's when JT joined. And I was investigating through, after I got from my mom some of my grandparents' old home movies and things, and I knew they had some films. So I grabbed them from my mom, and I said, it's old Disney World footage. Let me send this away and have it digitized, knowing that this was an experiment for the larger project, which was my own home movies growing up as a kid, from birth all the way up until the day my dad got a video recorder. I wanted to have all those home movies converted. And for those young listeners out there, yes, I am saying movie because I'm some of the few people out there. There's a difference between movie and video. So that's why it's home movie night and not home video night. So anyway, I sent away my grandparents' film. I learned how to restore it. I got it back digitally, and then tried all different pieces of software through trial and error to try and improve it. And I did, pretty good job. So I threw that up there on the website, and lo and behold, somebody pointed out that I had Jungle Cruise frogs. So I was like, what the hell is a Jungle Cruise frog? I don't know. I didn't even realize I had something there. So that prompted me to start looking at other footage, and Brian Miles was on Twitter, and he had a piece of footage, and he tweeted to me, and I said, somebody said to him, you get that over to Retro WDW. They know what to do with that. So we got talking, and then we formed the podcast, and got Hal Bowers involved, and we started restoring my own personal stuff. I had a few of them, but then Brian started going to flea markets, and I started looking on eBay, and we started buying people's old home movies. I mean, this is kind of a social experiment in a way. It's a time capsule of American history. It's a time capsule of technology. And, it's really interesting to see these people who, just get rid of this stuff after years of having it in their basement, or, some of the stuff hasn't been viewed in years. So we purchase it and then send it off for digital transfer. And we just started doing that over and over and over and releasing them with not a lot of fanfare. So eventually we started to pick up some steam when we were able to purchase some 16 millimeter films that Walt Disney World had produced, like The Magic of Walt Disney World, some promotional films. We got some in-park footage, such as the top scanner from Mission to Mars, and all of a sudden we had some pretty cool stuff. And then the big one came with Project Florida, which cost us $1,000 between buying it and transferring it and everything we had to do. And we did an audio adjustment to that, put a new audio soundtrack on it, and things really started to pick up speed. So at this point, I don't even know the count. It's well over 100 to 150 home movies that we've transferred. But then last year, House says to me, I got a big box. And I said, okay. So he sends it to me. He sends me the giant box of videotapes. So once a day, I'd pop a tape into my Super VHS deck that's hooked up to the computer and copy everything on the tape, and we look at what's on it and chop it up into different segments. Then he sent me a box of 8 millimeter video. So I did the same thing. He bought a camera, and we have the camera hooked up to the FireWire and saves it all out. And then we go through each individual one, and I edit it and put it all together and, create videos that we release. So when COVID came around, we did the Horizons release, and like, man, we got a lot of, I don't know, what do you guys think of a home movie night? Everyone's like, yeah, what the heck? Well, let's try it. Maybe people will like it. Sure enough, it was a big hit. We have a couple hundred viewers each night. We screen the films that nobody's seen in years. We've even had some family members join us back on it afterwards, and saying, oh my gosh, this particular family sent us their film to restore, and we put it on the show, and it was just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I just caught up actually with the one you did last week, which we're recording this in early May, so this was in late April, but they're all out there on YouTube for people to catch up with too. But basically, you also during that show kind of went through an example of how you'd restore a film, which I thought was really interesting. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because
sure.
One, I don't really know how you have time to like eat and sleep and do other things, because I would just be in those boxes all the time. But when you kind of get those films out and there's one that you think, okay, this is worth restoring, what's that kind of process like?
Sure.
Like how involved is it?
So the first thing we'll go through, the film comes in the mail, and I will literally pick it up, open it up, and put it on an old-timey projector. Turn the lights off, sit down there and watch it. And I project it on the wall in my office here, and decide whether or not it's worth it. And don't get me wrong, people think, oh, the whole thing is Walt Disney World. No, farthest from it. I would say 75% of the time we get these big 6-7 inch reels, and 3 to 9 minutes of it is Walt Disney World. Very rare is it completely full. So I have to sit there and watch, people eat turkey with their family from the 1970s to a lot of them on the beach, a lot of Marineland, St. Augustine, a lot of these trips. And you have to remember that the 70s was kind of a high point in terms of, road trips there. You're past the Eisenhower highway era, so to speak, but you really are in, what are you going to do? We're going to drive to Florida. Everybody drove to Florida. And you bought a camera along to bring your memories back. So I will sit there and literally as the film changes over to Walt Disney World, I'll cut the film with a pair of scissors, and everything that is not interesting, that's where the term the cutting room floor comes from, because it goes right onto the floor and all the Disney stuff gets spooled back up. So when we get enough of this, somewhere between 1,300, 1,500, 2,500 feet, to give you an idea, 50 feet is about 3 minutes.
Wow.
So you can do some math there. It's all spooled up on different size reels, and we mark it and I send it off, and 2 to 4 weeks later it will come back to us with a hard drive or a download, and we get the films back. And at that point I have individual files of each of the reels, so those have to be cut into the actual films that we sent in, because these are all spliced together, and nothing has been done to them. So they have the sprocket holes, they have all the dirt, all the scratches, all the typical stuff that a film would have on it. So we go through a number of different steps that I've learned over the years. The first one is we do deshaking, which basically does what it sounds like. It takes the shake or the wobble out of somebody's camera movements, or just the normal gate movement. The gate sounds like it is a gate that comes down and goes back up to create the flicker, and also when the gate comes down, the film advances, it goes back up to show the frame. Very much like the Viewmaster, when you press it down, right? The gate would come down, and it'd be black, and then you let go, it would come up, and you'd see the next frame. That's exactly what's happening. But because of that movement, the frame actually gets moved around when the film is, when you're recording or you're filming. So it's never perfectly steady. So by deshaking, we can make it a little more smooth. The next thing we do is noise reduction and dirt reduction, which basically compares multiple frames. So we'll compare up to 5 frames on either side of the frame you're looking at. And let's just imagine there's the castle, green grass in the sky, and there's dirt on the third frame. So it looks at the first frame and then the second frame and the third frame and says, well, okay, in the third frame here, I see a speck of dirt, but it wasn't here in the second and the first, and it's not there in the fourth and the fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth. So therefore, I'll take a combination of frames 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever, and put them together to remove that speck of dust. That's kind of how it works. So it's always looking ahead and behind itself. So they'll digitally remove those, and then it will do the same for the grain. The grain is in film. We're used to perfect video now, right? If there's a color gradient, it looks perfect. But the tighter the grain, the richer the color, and also the higher the resolution. And in poor quality films, the grain is much, much bigger and much, much more noticeable. And when you convert these, the grain kind of pops out. Kodachrome was fantastic. Doesn't have a lot of grain to it. And also, too, the lower the light level, the more grain you would get. And for those of you who took, old-timey photos in 1970, 1980, if you remember, there were different speeds of film, too, right? You had your 100, your 200, 400, 800, and 1600. And those were based on light levels. And if you use the wrong film in different and then the wrong light setting, you would get more grain. 1600 film or 1200 film had a lot more grain because it was meant for slower speed, meaning nighttime. And your 100 had a tighter grain, but it was meant for really bright. So you can imagine using something in the middle, which most movie film is, you would get more grain in darker scenes and less grain in lighter scenes. Some purists say leave it in. I try to blend pulling it out and leaving some in, because if you take too much out, you do lose detail. So there's a fine line. There's a little bit of balance, and some stuff is just so grainy. You're like, just take it all out, because you're not saving anything. So after we do that, we then have to color correct. Which, if it's Kodachrome, it's generally not a bad deal to do. It's just generally tweaking the balance. But for the most part, not a lot of people spent the money on Kodak processing. So then we need to crop, resize it, make it fit, a widescreen in today. We never crop it to fit. We want you to always be able to see as much as you possibly can, but still look clean. So you'll never see us zoom in all the way and crop the top and bottom so that it fits a widescreen, but we will put the black borders on the side. And then we do a final sharpen and adjustment. And, to give you an idea, a 3-minute film can take upwards of, multiple run-throughs, the system running anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour for each one. So 3 minutes can take easily over 2 hours to do, depending on how troubling the film is, how much we had to tweak the color, how many passes I do. I've gotten pretty good at where I can generally get most of this stuff done through 1 or 2 passes now. I used to be doing it like 4 or 5, but I've tweaked the software and figured everything out. And then we do, then we add our little things on top of it and, watermark and send it on its merry way. So, it's a labor of love. It's funny. You said, where do you have time for it? Well, once you get good at it, you set it up, and then you just let this stuff run in the background. And then you're like, oh, I forgot about that. That's been done for an hour. And then you load another one up, do a couple minutes on it. So it does take time. The worst time to do is like just getting it ready to put on the internet and writing articles about it. Like that's that bores me.
Yeah.
If I had a YouTube channel that had no descriptions, it's like, here, just go watch this.
See this. That's all I will say.
Yeah, see this. That's all.
So how did you learn how to do all this? Was it all self-taught, or do you have background in this type of thing? Because it sounds super complicated to somebody like me who doesn't have that history. It
is complicated. So my film history goes back to my childhood. My father went to the University of Miami in college as a cinematography major. So he came out and he actually made commercial films, not TV commercial, but commercial films edited for JCPenney in New York City for a while. And then he got into printing and thus ended his cinema career. But he always had an affinity for cameras, and even as a kid, he bought his first one and was making films at a young age. And I grew up just around film, understanding how to splice it, what it meant to thread the projector and the little viewfinder you'd crank it through for editing. So I was just naturally born with that, and or raised amongst it, I should say. I wasn't born with it. It's not an instinct. And then, as I had my own family and got our cameras, I took a lot of interest in what he did and the way that he would frame things and slow zooms and being a little careful not to just wing the camera around real quick, make it pleasant for the person watching. So that was, behind the scenes on the camera and a little bit on the editing. When it came to converting it and learning how to restore it, completely self-taught. I mean, I'm quite technical. I work in the tech industry. I've been so for for my entire career. I've been futzing with computers so on. So the natural ability to learn and understand a new program or a script or something that needs to do something is there, but then you need to learn how to use the tool. So I can implement the tool, but how do I use it is the hard part. It's like if you have a drill, you know what to do, you plug it in, right? Now, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to drill a hole through your hand, right? So I drill holes through my hand quite often with this, to use a bad metaphor. So it was all self-taught. I would say majority of the software I use is public domain. Some of it date back to the early 2000s. It's so good and does such a great job. The learning curve on that stuff that still runs today and does a fantastic job is lower than the real high-end, Hollywood type production software that costs thousands of dollars, and the learning curve on that is just above and beyond. So this is hobbyist level software. So we've purchased a couple things. We've purchased the filters that we use for denoising, which is called Neat Video. We've purchased the AI software that upscales everything that we've used for Horizons and we'll use for Journey into Imagination, but we're not talking a tremendous amount of money. Our editing software we purchased. So a lot of it is just sitting down over year after year after year, seeing different pieces of software and blending it all together. So it's been fun, and we'll continue doing it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds like now too, you're just getting so much great material that there's all these skills. You really have just some, at least from what I've seen, some of the videos they look incredible, and I know the reaction's been really positive to so much of it, even beyond just Disney World. So I wanted to circle back. You talked about starting Retro WDW and connecting with Brian, Howe, and JT. But I'm curious about the podcast itself because, I feel like your podcast since the start has this really nice laid back vibe where the four of you are hanging out. It almost feels like we're hanging out with you guys and just talking about, what was going on with the wave machine or what's, Lake Buena Vista or the attractions or whatever. So I'm curious how much of the concept of it fit with that, or did it kind of evolve as you went along, or just how did it come together, and what were you kind of hoping to do with it?
It's funny because we never originally had a goal. We just were gonna let's just talk about something every month, and we never even thought people would want to listen to us, let alone come to an event or anything like that in the future. So if you dial back to the first couple episodes, we were pre-writing scripts, so to speak, and we had papers in front of us to kind of follow the tempo and remind me just how to do the opening and what to say. We had this old forum system, and we would post in there of things in kind of a script, and the format that you see today was a little bit of trial and error. We've gotten rid of some things over the years. We've condensed some things. We've dropped some of the features of the podcast that were getting too weighty or just, weren't flowing right. So what you really see, the product is really a natural progression of what we felt worked and what we felt most comfortable doing in keeping the tempo of the show up. One of the things that we knew we were up against was timing, and there's a couple of reviews out there like, oh, you want to listen to something for 2 hours? This is the one to do it. Well, sorry, that's what we're there to, and we never wanted to do a real 2-hour show. We always said it would be an hour to hour and a half, and we got away from us a little bit, but we wanted to keep everybody, the listeners, interested. So as we've materialized and as things have evolved, we've almost come to a point where, all right, Hal, this is your show, or you, Hal and Todd are going to do this, or Brian's going to lead, and JT's going to, ride, shotgun here and add additional commentary and things, and the others will chime in. So we've kind of passed the baton around, which has really worked, because then the listeners get a different viewpoint from different types of storytellers, because all four of us do tell the story in a different way. All four of us have different histories of being there. And we all look at it in a very different way. So I think that's really one of the interesting aspects of the dynamic that the four of us have formed, is the way that we can tell these stories and keep the part of it is really trying to keep somebody entertained and involved in listening, especially when you can't hold anything up. You do a podcast. Yeah. You want people to listen and be engaged. So then comes in the editing of a little bit of music and a little ha-ha moment, and, throwing our, all of us having grown up the 70s, 80s, and 90s as our core here, throwing in little commercial breaks and little, like this past month, Brian referenced the line in Fletch, we threw that in,
yeah.
Or the Meow Mix commercial, meow, 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 that thrown in. I expect you, Dan, to put Meow Mix in right now.
Oh, yes.
Meow, 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 meow.
There. So see, things like that really, pull the listener in. So things have been accidental. Some things have just worked out, but it's been a fun experiment, and, we're on year 6, and I can hardly believe it.
Yeah, it's interesting to look back, because I was like, wow, that was 2014. Time has really flown by. And but it's a good point too, because like you mentioned, each one of you has slightly different era when you were going to the like How has gone a lot in the 70s, and then JT obviously more recently. But I think that's good, because then it's not for people with the exact same approach or even the same interest. I think that really helps the show, because if not, it's good to have variety, even with kind of a focus on one thing in a way.
Yeah. The other interesting thing too is that, I mean, if people who are listeners to our show are new to it, you might go in there, they're only once a month or once every 6 weeks. That's by purpose. One, we can't tire ourselves out, right? This has been 6 years. It's been an awesome ride. I'm looking forward to continue. We wouldn't be here if we did this weekly. People have written to us before, do the show weekly. I need it. No way. I mean, it's sometimes a 5 to 8 hour edit for the podcast. You got 4 tracks, and then you got multiple audio tracks coming in. The really difficult ones take a while. The really easy ones you knock out in a few hours. So no, we're not. We like the cadence. We want to do the research. We want to bring things to the listener that are correct and have as much research as possible. We always open with comments and corrections, so that if we have a correction to make, we'll admit our faults and mistakes. And keeping pace with the time, I think is really important, that the listener doesn't sit there and just bite at the bullet of, I'll listen to the next one next week. It makes it a little more exciting for the listener to know, there's a new one dropped. Yes, I want to actually listen to them for an hour and 45 minutes drone on about how the swan boats were propelled and why it wasn't a propeller. You know what I mean? But that's the type of audience we have. So I think there's a little bit of suspense each month that goes with it, that is, not by design. I think it's just a product of how we're putting it out. And the last thing too is that the four of us don't rely on this for an income. We don't rely on it to keep any of us going or keep website going or put food on the table. There's a lot of websites and a lot of content producers out there, podcasts and videos, that they don't do it. They don't eat, and they've moved to Florida and changed their lifestyle to be that way. And that's completely fine for them and the audience they're attracting. And it's just not something for us. And then also too, the other aspect is, we throw in the whole nonprofit portion of it now, which is really, changing the game for us, where we're trying to record history and put things down in a way that can be savored for everybody else in the future. And it's not just entertainment. It's also a historical record of what we've learned, what we've researched, and what people can view through the videos and audio.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I found it really interesting when you started the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, and it totally seemed like the right fit, because like you said, you could really sense, just with how much research you were doing and just the interest in history and these films, that your show was different. And I mean that in a good way. And how has kind of your approach changed? I mean, now that you have a nonprofit and basically you're preserving information. And I mean, you're doing more than just saying, hey, we're fans of these things. You're actually actively preserving it. How has that approach changed, or has it at all since you started that?
It's changed in a couple ways, in that we realize the importance of our image archive and the film archive, and also what we're saying each month on the podcast. So to us, those are the three most important pieces that need to be saved. So we have a couple efforts underway. Obviously, you see what's going on with the films. We're just one after another, we're releasing them. We've got a whole bunch of them sitting in the pipeline of house videos and stuff. From the podcast perspective, we're working as best we can. There's individuals who are, transcribing every single episode so that we can eventually get a text searchable, on the site, so you can search all the contents of the podcast episodes, which is fabulous. And then our image archive, it's 14,000 photos now, slides that we're purchasing. I just got a batch that Brian scanned today that are just unbelievably gorgeous. I mean, we're talking really amazing stuff by a professional photographer who went to EPCOT and Magic Kingdom in the 80s. But preserving those, but properly tagging them. We have a volunteer who works with the Smithsonian and their image archive, and she's working with us to figure out a way to properly tag these things. We have volunteers tagging photos. So those two things have really changed. Before, we were just throwing pictures up and saying, hey, look at this. And people were like, well, it's a picture of Smart One, but it's called image_022 1983. It's like, you didn't know it was Smart One. So, but creating that, so that's really changed it. The other ability is that, I think it gives us a little more presence out there. We are a true nonprofit. Again, none of us are doing any of this for money. Anything that people donate goes right into the funds for us, being able to purchase these films and slides. In the past, it was my money, it was Hal's money, it was Brian's money and JT's money that paid for this stuff. And as little tricklings came in, or people would randomly just give us, hey, here's $100. They're like, all right, who gets the $100? That split it amongst ourselves. So I think that's changed. That now that, hey, it's got its own bank account, we can run this thing and preserve the history. And it also opens us up to being able to put on events that can bring in talent and bring in people from Disney and understand who we are, and that we're not a fan created entity to go out there and create fan buzz and make money. Right? This is a different story. And with our event at Retro Magic, I think it was quite obvious there. Disney had us in there with welcome arms and did things for us that we never thought they would allow us to do. And they were like, yeah, we'll make sandwiches for you. We'll put Orange Bird on cookies for you. You're at our place, So it was really, really awesome of them to allow us to do that. So I think it's given us a little bit of leverage in that way. And not to say there's other fan groups out there that do very, very similar things. But I think that nonprofit side of it might give us a little bit of an edge out there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm still kicking myself. It just didn't work out for me to go to Retro Magic. And now you've been posting some of the full sessions on YouTube. And I was watching Ron Logan today, and they're just piling up. And I'm like, I need to sit down and watch all these, which is great for me, though, because I feel like, you get to kind of be there even when you're not. But I know you're looking at doing, notwithstanding anything going on with the virus and everything, but your current plans are to do one in 2021 again. And I'm curious, I know it's really early, but kind of do you have some just general thoughts on what you might like to do there, at least in terms of a theme and everything?
I think it'll obviously focus on being 50 years and bringing in some things that have happened over the past 50 years and some individuals. Brian's got a list and he hasn't showed it to me yet. So he's been working on it and he told me he would write it up. So I think it sits with Brian right now. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll follow a similar format that we did. We learned some things. So to those of you who did come, thank you. And we apologize that we did not have coffee in the middle of the day. That was our error on our part. And so we're going to break it up a little differently. The gift is always a huge thing we like to do. There's a couple of other people that we've got in mind to bring in. We did try getting Michael Eisner, but he wanted an exorbitant amount of money. So we passed on that unless everybody here wants to make, couple $1,000 donation and, a lot of $1,000 donations. Yeah, there's definitely some other people that we can do. And again, that's just so people know the donations, we spent quite a bit of money to fly all these people in and put them up in hotels. That was our dime doing that. So this isn't people just saying, yeah, I'll fly cross country for you and stay for 3 nights in Walt Disney World and talk for an hour and then leave, No, they want the money. We cover it for them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would have figured that's the case. But too, given how many people you had at that event with, Bob Gurr and Tom Nabby and Tom Morrison, so many other people that, have done a lot. So I think that list was impressive. And yeah, Michael Eisner, man, it would be amazing. But still, I think it's really cool that you had some people too that names I don't know as well, even someone who's doing a podcast, or even someone like Jim Sarno, who I think has such a cool story. Yeah. Just some really cool people. And there's so many more out there you could talk with.
Well, what's funny about the lineup too is we shot for the moon and we didn't realize that all engines would fire and we would actually hit the moon. So when we invited everybody who we invited said yes. And then we looked at each other and said, okay, how are we going to fit this into an 8-hour day? And I think we did a good job. It was definitely a long and tiring day. I know people who attended and ourselves, we were exhausted by the end of the day. It was a big thing to put together. So that was another thing we learned from it. So, but you do have to kind of shoot for what your ultimate is, expecting some people to not be able to come, but before you knew it, everybody was available and we had, what do we do? So yeah, we'll see who we can get for the next one. We've got a couple people in mind, and I think we'll have some repeat guests. I mean, Nabby, anything we do, Nabby wants to come too. So.
Oh, I talked to him and I just said to ask him like a line and he would just go on some amazing story for 15 minutes. Yeah. He's great.
That's fabulous story.
Well, before we finish, I would love to hear a little bit more from you about things you like with the parks, because I know we've been talking about so many amazing things you're doing with Retro WDW and everything, but I wouldn't call these I always say I'm going to do rapid fire, and then it never works that way. So I'm not going to say rapid fire. This isn't like a one-word answer, but
slow burn.
But yeah, like not 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But so I'm just going to ask some different various questions and see what you think. Okay, so first one. And I promise these are not like trivia. I'm not designed to stump you or anything. These are just kind of fun things. So
sure.
All right. If you could bring back just one of these attractions at Epcot, which one would you choose? World of Motion, Horizons, or the original Journey into Imagination?
So here's my answer on that. I wouldn't bring back Horizons because everybody else is asking for it and it's not coming back. Plus, I have spent so much time restoring that video. I don't know if I can stomach another ride through it. No. Journey into Imagination, I mean, we still have the track there. It's not the bit. So there's still a bit of historical aspect there that is great. I'm hopeful that we'll do something correct. That Disney will do something correctly there in the future. And World of Motion is kind of the underplayed, unsung hero in my trio of top rides at Epcot, which was the Walter Cronkite Spaceship Earth, Horizons, and World of Motion. So call me an oddball. I would go with World of Motion.
I don't hate it. I mean, I just think about...
I loved it.
To me, it's almost more like Pirates of the Caribbean than a lot of the other Epcot things. It's like all these animatronics, plus you've got the speed rooms, which are incredible, and just it's so long, and it has connections to the World's Fair. There's so many great things, and the music.
You got a lot of Mark Davis type gags in there that are just ideal for it. So
I can't argue with it. Okay, so looking more recently, what's a recent new attraction at Walt Disney World that you've really enjoyed?
Well, I can't say I've been on the Slinky Dog coaster yet because every time we go, the line's too long. So, recent ones.
It could be last 15 years, actually.
Yeah. I'm trying to. The Pandora. I'm not into Pandora. I really enjoy the Seven Dwarfs coaster. I mean, I think that's one of the enjoyable ones because, and the reason is that anybody I've taken there, it's the one coaster that they feel really, really comfortable going on. In fact, I've had people go on that, family members that didn't want to go on Goofy's Barnstormer. So I think that's the one that I have the most memories on, with the most number of people in such a short period of time. So that's what I'd give my nod to.
Yeah, I mean, my wife doesn't do coasters, and she likes Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. My daughters rode it when they were like 4 or something, and did not traumatize them. They were very happy. So I think there's something to be said for that. And it doesn't hurt us like Barnstormer, which I find as an adult is a very, very painful experience.
It is, especially as you get in our age here.
Yes. So I don't know if you want to give this away, but you could even say someone who's not alive. But what former Imagineer or even Disney executive beyond Michael Eisner would be on like your bucket list for a future event?
Good question. I mean, yeah, Michael Eisner would be on there just because of so much he's done. Tony Baxter used to be on our list because there's so many stories that he's got. I think he's actually been exposed over the years, and his stories have been told over and over and over again. I'm not going to name a specific person, but I'm going to say that I would like to get somebody on there again that has not had the exposure that everybody else has had in the past. There's somebody like a Jim Sarno that you can bring to the front, bring to the spotlight, and give them the credit that they deserve, and also introduce them to the world, as we've done with Sarno and Jeff Blythe and others. So an unnamed person that deserves some credit. How's that?
Oh, I think that's great. And I think those are perfect examples, and other people you've talked with on the show, and that would be awesome. Okay, so looking beyond an attraction, just for you, what is like a gem from Disney's past that you really like that's not just like a ride?
That's not just a ride. So in the parks in general.
You could even say on the resort itself.
It's almost not even one specific thing. When I was young and would go there, in my mid-teens and early 20s, I noticed that the world that they had created really sucked you out of reality. That fades with you over time as you're older, and as we carry the news and everything in our hip pocket now and all that. So I think what they've created, and I think it's melted a little bit over the years, but there's still that ability to escape in the resort, leave a lot of things behind. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's I think people are probably hopefully nodding at the other side going, yeah, I know what he means. It's not something you can specifically put your finger on, but there's also this, when you go back, you've been there before, and you're going to come back. So you couple that all together, and I think it's that general feeling that they've given you from the second you cross that bump in the concrete from that other property to their property into Walt Disney World that No,
I think that's a great answer, and I understand what you're saying. I don't think it's too cliched,
okay, good.
So you're good. I'm not gonna go against that at all. Okay, let's do 2 more. One, currently, when you go, what is your favorite attraction at Walt Disney World?
Oh, that's an interesting one. We've only been to studios once in past 9 years, maybe, or 8 years, because it was just half park, so I can't say anything there. Animal Kingdom is not our park. We go there when friends want to go, and we'll go with them, and we just go to eat at Yak and Yeti. So that's pretty much it. If I was answering for my wife, I think Test Track would be up there. I will actually give that to Pirates, actually, and just because I think that embodies so much of the original Imagineers. On top of it, something that I've been on from day one. Actually, I take that back. I was scared to go on it. I don't think I went on my first trip, so it might have. No, maybe it was a Haunted Mansion. I can't remember, but anyway, I think it's probably Pirates, and then if you said an area. Tomorrowland at night when the crowds thin out, something about that area.
Yeah, no, I understand. Pirates, obviously, nobody's going to argue with that one. And then I agree. I love Tomorrowland at night, riding the People Mover, even though it doesn't have all the things it used to have, just still with Astro Orbiter and the People Mover and people going to Space Mountain and, the Incredibles dance party. No, I'm joking, but that is there now. But no, I think
it's there if you need it.
Yeah, I think I like the life of Tomorrowland still. I think it's really fun. And we always seem to end up there at night, like on our last day. And I'm right with you. Okay, last question. Off the top of your head, what are your 3 favorite extinct attractions? And I'm not going to hold you to this. So just the three that you think of.
Oh, World of Motion, because we talked about it earlier. The original Living with the Land, or I'm sorry, Listen to the Land, not Living with the Land, Listen to the Land, because that ride was a lot better when it was narrated. And then I think if we take a trip over to the Magic Kingdom, I think Delta Dream Flight was one of the things I really, really liked. Delta Dream Flight, as much as Buzz is fun. I kind of missed that one. It'll never come back. There'll never be a ride like that. But yeah, I'd give those three. Probably the odd ones that you didn't expect.
No, I think those are great. And, for me, If You Had Wings would probably be on there. So, because I rode that a lot as a kid. But Delta Dream Flight was great, too. I mean, I've been writing a blog about it recently, and I've been watching that ride video a lot of times. So I'm very familiar right now with Delta Dream Flight. So it has a lot going for it.
And if you edit a video of Horizons long enough, the Delta Dream Flight song starts to sound like Horizons and vice versa. It's really eerie, but just don't do that.
I don't know if I want that or not, but I after you described the editing you did, I'm kind of thinking like, wow, I love Horizons, but that's a lot of Horizons for sure.
There was a lot of muted editing, let's put it that way, because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Oh, I could totally imagine. Well, Todd, this has been great. I feel like I have even more respect for the restoration, and don't think it's something I'll ever be able to do, but it's awesome that you guys are out there doing the podcast and putting out the films and doing so many good things. And I think it's great, and I really appreciate it. If listeners want to know more about the podcast and the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society or connect with you, where's a good place to go?
So you can check us out at retrowdw.com, which has all of our podcast lists. It's got our photo archive, all links to film, and our main page, which is Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. You can get that at lbvhistory.org, and you can donate there. On top of that, we're every major social media platform: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We're our Retro WDW, so you can subscribe to us on all those different spots. We're most active on Twitter, giving out little things now and then. Anything we post gets double posted to Twitter and Facebook. Instagram's got some photos on there, and then obviously all the photos at YouTube. We're also on Vimeo at Retro WDW. So a lot of different places to find us. And there's this magic machine called Google. So if you just put in Retro WDW, you'll find us somewhere. How's that?
No, that's great. And all those places, there's a lot of really cool stuff, especially right now with what you're doing on YouTube. It's been a blast while we're all at home. So
we have almost tripled our subscribers in just a month and a half.
Wow, you're going to have to teach me how to do that. But
Release an Easter parade on Easter Sunday. That's the biggest trick in the book we ever had.
Excellent.
Never expected it. 50,000 views in one day. I couldn't believe it.
Wow, people were at home trying to get the magic of Easter, and that's what did it.
That's right. If you could, Regis Philbin and Joan London helped out on that one, I guess.
All right. Well, Todd, thanks so much for doing this.
You're very welcome, Dan. Thanks for having us on, and we look forward to new listeners and new watchers on our videos and podcasts. So thanks a lot.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you should check out my interviews with Hal Bowers and Brian P. Miles, both of the Retro Disney World podcast. You can find those and a lot more at tomorrowsociety.com/podcasts with an S at the end. Just a reminder that the Tomorrow Society podcast is a listener-supported show. If you'd like to help out, you can make a monthly contribution by becoming an official member of the Tomorrow Society through Patreon, and you get access to some really cool perks, including the monthly Tomorrow Society Bulletin podcast. You can learn more at tomorrowsociety.com/member. Wanted to give a shout out to my latest member, Jim Caserta. Thanks so much, Jim, for the support. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Follow me on Twitter at tomorrowsoc, Facebook or Instagram at Tomorrow Society, and YouTube at tomorrowsociety.com/YouTube. The Tomorrow Society podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Dan Heaton. The music was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Next time, I will be talking with former Disney Imagineer Tom K. Morris. We talk about his book and how that's coming together on the early days of Imagineering and some of his finds there, Splash Mountain, and a lot more. Please be safe out there. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you again very soon.